Hello everybody, welcome again to this edition of JURIS, where we discuss all your legal issues without getting you confused. Today we want to talk about the enforcement of these basic human rights that we spoke about the last time. Let me start by saying again that the Constitution is a supreme document that governs the contract between the state and the citizens. It is what, like I referred to the last time, as a ground norm, the law that undergirds every other law in the society. So that means that the Constitution has the highest hierarchy amongst all the laws in the land. Having said that, we can now understand the status of these human rights because they are enshrined in the Constitution. These human rights have been put in the Constitution, so that means that they command the same level of force or regard which the Constitution commands in regulating the affairs of the society. Why is it necessary for us to understand this? Because we need to understand that in every confrontation we have, whenever these rights are challenged, whenever we have these rights derogated from, we must understand that we have a legitimate right to insist on the enforcement of these rights. And like I also mentioned earlier on, any right that you don't enforce, any right that you don't insist on, becomes intangible. It becomes of no effect. It's just like wasted knowledge. For these rights to have meaning, for these rights to have value, every individual in the society must insist on enforcing their rights, of course, within the bounds of the law. For instance, there is this trend now where governments are becoming more powerful, more dictatorial. And you find that the place given to these basic rights is being relegated to the background. Or rather, the space where these human rights occupy is shrinking more and more as states become more dictatorial. So the state wants to tell you where to go, where to assemble, when to assemble, what to say. The state wants to tell you what medication to take, what to do with your body, what to do with your child. These are novel concepts that are creeping into the society at large. And if we as individuals are not watchful, if we do not insist on preserving, maintaining, and enforcing these our fundamental rights, we will lose them. So like the point I'm trying to make is that our rights, unless we enforce them, they are intangible and they lose value. So that brings us to why and how can we enforce these rights? How can we enforce these rights? Let me take some practical examples. For instance, the right to freedom of movement, which says that your right to move about cannot be limited. Or the right, okay, let's take the right to liberty. Your right to liberty cannot be limited, cannot be derogated from, except there is a lawful court order to that effect, or a judgment or a sentence of court to that effect. Now, what do you do in a situation where you're going about your business, like Fela again will say, you're going your JJ way, as Fela will say, you're going about your lawful business, minding your business, and then maybe a state actor, maybe an overzealous law enforcement officer or policeman accosts you you may or may not demand an identification, and then he tells you you're under arrest, places you under arrest, or tries to detain your movement. Now, that is a derogation of your right. And you know that these rights are guaranteed in the Constitution, and these rights say expressly that you cannot be detained except under the due course of the law. And you know you've not done anything. You know that you're a legitimate citizen going about your legitimate business. What do? That is where knowledge is important. In such cases, you need to let the state actor or police officer know that you know your rights. You don't have to be aggressive. You don't have to be offensive, but you must be firm. And there is something that puts every overzealous officer on the back foot when they know that you know exactly what your rights are under the law. So the first strategy is, number one, is you have to be knowledgeable about your rights. And then number two is that you have to insist firmly but politely on those rights. It's very important. Because of our military psyche, because of our experience of, under military rule, sometimes we feel that the only way you can solve a problem is by force. No, sometimes you can actually get your way by moral persuasion, by standing on the right thing. The Gandhis of India were able to send their conquerors, their oppressors out of their country by just insisting on the right thing without firing a gun. So I think that in our society, oftentimes we underestimate the power of just insisting on the right thing. You don't have to fight anybody. You don't have to resort to arm. You don't have to resort to self. But sometimes by standing and insisting on the right thing, you have your rights protected. Now, one of the tricks that some of these misinformed officers play on your or state actors play on you is that they try to make you understand that the ordeal that they will put you through if you insist on your rights will be worse than if you just capitulate to them. And so you find that sometimes, maybe because you're in a hurry, you don't want to maybe go to the station with the police officer, and so you let him run roughshod as a way over you and over your rights. That is a self-defeatist approach. And part of that is why we are coming to you, and we are telling ourselves that, listen, we can't go on like this. We need to learn to insist on our rights and insist to the end, no matter the time it takes, no matter the effort it takes. Because the truth is, if you insist on your rights, number one is that the Constitution provides that for every arrest, there must be reasonable justification. Number two, even when you are invited to the police station, no police station or no police department can keep you there beyond 24 hours when there is a court within 40 kilometers radius where that station is, or at worst, no police station can keep you beyond 48 hours. So if you have this knowledge in your mind, then you know that no matter the braggadocio, no matter the threats they throw at you, they have a time limit within which to tell you what exactly is your offense, or they will have to let you go. So that's one strategy of enforcement. Very fundamental is that we must first of all know we have these rights, and then we must be willing to insist on these rights without intimidation. Secondly, insist on having access to your lawyer as soon as possible. Once any state actor knows that you have access to legal advice or to legal representation, they will be much more reluctant to trample on your rights. I know, of course, that sometimes because of the economy, a lot of people feel that they cannot afford lawyers. But there are other avenues that you can, other arrangements you can have with your lawyer that can make him available to you, or that can enable you to avail his services whenever you need it. And there are other legal aid organizations that you can other NGOs that you can reach out to in such situations. Another important aspect of enforcement is the activity of civil liberties, the activity of civil liberty organizations. We're also calling on them to be more proactive and also to be more dedicated and not just grandstanding in coming to the aid of people whose rights have been abused. Another point is that, like I said, the Constitution represents the ground norm, the highest hierarchy of law in the land, but the truth is that behind the Constitution is the will of the people. That is why every preamble in the Constitution starts with "we the people." So at the end of the day, there has to be a political aggregation to the enforcement of rights. As a society, we must be able to come together to preserve and to enforce our rights. That is why you have some of these organizations or NGOs where people come together. So when there is a consensus, for instance, it will be difficult for any officer or any state actor in any place to abuse the right of one person when he knows that there is a collective will that will not be the case. So political aggregation or collective action is also important in enforcing and safeguarding these our rights. And of course, we also have access to the courts. For every one of these rights that has been violated, the individual or the person is actually entitled to compensation. And it is provided that you can apply to the state high court or to the federal high court for every one of these human rights that has been violated. Of course, you can always reach out to your lawyer. He knows the processes to access and to avail of the remedies available in these courts. So that's another area of enforcement. You can go to court. You can actually go to court and enforce these rights when they have been violated. So these are some of the ways that we can make sure that these rights are not just theoretical. It starts with us. First of all, we must know them. Secondly, we must learn the art of insisting on these rights without necessarily being violent, and not to be intimidated as we insist on these rights. Thirdly, we can try to avail ourselves of legal representation as soon as possible. And then, of course, fourthly, we should aggregate ourselves as a political front to insist that these rights are always preserved and respected. So when we come again, we look at other aspects of rights, because rights are not just fundamental, they are also economic rights. And we will talk more about this next time. So remember, go to our YouTube channel, Zerigen TV, and subscribe and click on the bell so that you can get notifications when we are on. Remember also to drop your comments or drop your questions in the comment section. And like we told you before, we will give priority to those who have subscribed to our YouTube channel. So until next time, stay blessed.